Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry we're about a minute late for the Educational Affairs Committee meeting. Welcome to Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. We'll start with the agenda. Do we have the agenda, Dr. Smith?
No, I don't have the agenda. I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking.
Well, okay, so we have the presentation up, but okay, we'll start with a roll call. And I'll just go through everyone's name. Charles Burdell Williams.
Present.
David Cohen.
Present.
Zachary Epps.
Present.
Joel Fishbein.
Present.
Pamela Henry. Jennifer Loman.
Present.
Leah Mulhern.
Present.
Daniel Schultz. And Julie Haywood. Present. And next we'll go to approval of the Educational Affairs Committee meeting minutes of December 21st, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move, Charles Burdell Williams.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, Leah Mulhern.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Those minutes are approved. Next, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Smith. And we're going to have an update on the Health and Safety Committee, Health and Safety Plan by Miss Jessica Keene.
Thank you, Ms.
Student Services.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Tonight's Educational Affairs Committee meeting, Tuesday, January 18th, it's all about health, safety, and wellness. Next slide, please, Ms. Keene. And as always, slide 2 brings us back to and centers us around the district's mission and vision. And we ask that our school board of directors and our community continue to make sure that the presentations we give and the information that we share, as well as the ideas and suggestions that come through this committee are all reflected back to our mission and our vision. And again, tonight's presentation is around health, wellness, and safety. And I will turn things over to Ms. Jessica Keene at this point. She is our Director of Student Services.
Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to sharing some information with you in regards to our updated health and safety plan and some of the things that we're going to be implementing, have implemented, and will be implementing this school year as it pertains to the social emotional well-being of our students. As of last week, January 11th, we received updated guidance from the Office of Public Health as well as the CHOP Policy Lab, changing some of the mitigation tactics that we have been utilizing this school year. One of those revisions was to our Test to Stay program. Previously, our Test to Stay program was for our students who were considered to be close contacts within the school setting. They were able to participate in a testing cadence as long as we had a QR code and a consent form from their parents. With the updated guidance, Test to Stay is now only for staff who are considered to have a household contact. The staff also have to be unvaccinated or partially vaccinated meaning that they have not received their booster shot within the time frame stated by the CDC. These staff members will be permitted to return to the building after they've been identified as having a household contact, and they would be tested for 10 days straight in our nurses suite. This would ensure that they remain asymptomatic and also free of COVID-19. So it allows them to remain in the building while being tested from day 1 to day 10. The next update is Mask to Stay. Mask to Stay, in a sense, replaces Test to Stay for our students. It's along the same lines. If a student is considered to be a close contact within the school setting or outside in the community, not a household contact, but outside in the community, then they are able to remain in school for a 5-day time frame. On days 4 through 6, they are able to be tested by our school nurse. and they must remain during that time frame asymptomatic. Mask to stay is for our unvaccinated or partially vaccinated students. They are eligible for that program. There was also change to our contact tracing. We are no longer contact tracing within the classroom setting. Contact tracing is specific to the cafeteria exposure. We will not be sending out individual notification to close contacts. A general notification will be sent out from each building in regards to close contact status, mainly focusing on the amount of COVID positive cases within a building during that school day. But we are no longer required to provide individual families with notification if their student is considered to be a close contact. Some revisions to the assurance testing. We are no longer providing assurance testing for our unvaccinated staff at this time. For our testing protocols, we will continue to test symptomatic students and staff within our school buildings. So if they are presenting with 2 or more of the COVID-19 symptoms, they are eligible to receive a test. I wanted to clarify that a lot of the rules that we have in place are different when it comes to household contacts. If a student has a household contact, this is not pertaining to staff, but if a student has a household contact, then they are required to quarantine for a minimum of 8 days. On day 5, they are able to get tested. And if they are negative, then they are permitted to return to the building on day 8. So a lot of our revisions as far as mask to stay do not pertain to household contacts. It's just contacts within the school building or community contacts. So with the changes with the CDC and the shortening of the quarantine period, we have received an updated exclusion guide. So I know the words are very small on this form and there are a lot of words on here. So on the next slide, I'll kind of clarify what this all means. This is the same exclusion chart that we have been utilizing since the beginning of the school year, just with the additional changes. There are changes made to this form as well. So if a student or a staff member is tested positive for COVID-19, then they have to quarantine for a 5-day period. If they remain asymptomatic, then they are eligible to return back to the school building wearing a well-fitted mask from days 6 to 10. In order for us to participate in the Mask to Stay program, we also have to extend this to our athletes. So if we have an athlete who at this time, they're do not have to wear a mask when they are participating in an athletic competition, they are going to be required to wear a mask during the athletic competition if they are coming out of quarantine and participating in the activity from day 6 to 10. A close contact that's defined on the exclusion chart is someone who is within 6 feet of a COVID-19 positive individual for 15 minutes or more, or someone who has a household contact. There is an exception to the overall close contact definition as it pertains to the school setting. So in a K-12 indoor classroom setting where masks can be observed, that is an exception to the 6 feet or more for 15 minutes, as well as if a student is 3 to 6 feet of an infected student where masks can be observed. So then the last portion just talks about the continued quarantine period as far as a close contact is concerned. If you're a close contact, you have to quarantine within 5 days of your last exposure. If you have symptoms, and without symptoms, you also need to quarantine for 5 days after exposure. And with that, if you are symptomatic, you cannot return to school or to work unless your symptoms subside. So with all the new mitigation tactics, the Office of Public Health, as well as the CHOP Policy Lab, are trying to get school districts to look at COVID in a different way. It's not something that we are going to get rid of, but it's something that we have to live with. So their goal is to continue with as many strategies that we can utilize to keep our children safe, but to also keep them within the school buildings. They are firmly believing that students are safer within the buildings than they are in the community. Within the buildings, we're able to put certain policies and procedures in place to keep them safe, whereas we can't be sure that when they're out in the community that those same procedures are being followed. So the tactics that they have put in place are in an effort to keep our buildings open and to keep our students in the building as much as possible. So in regards to some of our procedures that we're updating, we have added a new nursing agency that we contract out with for our substitute nurses, Aviana. We're continuing our partnership with GHR as well as Kelly Services. We have an inquiry out to Aviana and GHR to find a part-time nurse to assist us with our testing within our school buildings. As you can imagine, that has been a very heavy burden on our school nurses this school year. So we have solicited their support and they are actively looking for someone to fill this position. The inquiry was made about 2 months ago, but as you all know and have seen on social media and on the news about our nursing shortages, we are also affected by that as well. As we know, vaccines are our mitigation tactic that we are trying to push to our families. It doesn't eradicate COVID. It doesn't prevent you from getting it, but it does prevent severe illness. So as a district, we are continuing to promote that and continuing to have our vaccine clinics. So we have one scheduled for January 19th at Cedarbrook Middle School, as well as Cheltenham High School. Students will be eligible to get their booster shots during that time. Notification went out. Parents needed to complete a consent form. And the students will need to present the consent form along with their vaccine card at the time of vaccination on the 19th. Just an update on sports spectators. We have decided that we are no longer permitting guest visitors to attend our sports for the winter season. We are still limiting the number of spectators that our families can have at a sports event, but we are no longer allowing visitors to spectate. We have solicited the support of Dr. Horsey to provide us with some additional COVID-19 administrative duties. She will be starting back with us tomorrow, and she's going to assist in making sure all of our plans are up to date and just providing us with that additional support that we need as we continue to navigate the pandemic. So for our families that are having a challenging time wanting their students to go back, concerned about their health, if they have underlying health issues, certain mental health issues, we are still offering our virtual learning network program, VLN. This program is very unique because it's tailored to our school district. So we are able to provide students with a learning experience that mirrors what they would get in their brick and mortar building. They would be able to touch base with a homeroom teacher daily. The work is very self-motivated, but they work with you. The homeroom teacher has office hours twice a day where students can log on and get additional assistance. And we also have monthly meetings with the students' counselor, along with our representatives from VLN, to talk about their progress and how the district can continue to support those students. We still track the students' attendance through VLN, so they would be updated in PowerSchool. And if they are having attendance issues, we're able to support them in that as well. Currently, we have enrolled 12 students in VLN for this school year, and we have 9 active students in VLN. So in totality, if we're talking about all of our COVID mitigation, we also have to focus on what toll this is taking on our students academically as well as socially. So this school year, utilizing some of our ESSER funds, we have put in place Effective School Solutions. They are providing us with a myriad of support across our district. I have a representative from Effective School Solutions, Ms. Elise Bronson, who has been spearheading a lot of the initiatives that we're putting in place. And she's going to talk a little bit today about our Tam Coaching Process, which is our trauma-attuned model. She's been working with building teachers and counselors in our K through 12 buildings. She provided them with a few hours of initial training that happened virtually. And then she is now in the process of providing them with observations and feedback. So she'll be able to talk a little bit more to that. Elise has also facilitated our parent professional development sessions, which we've had 2 of so far this school year. And she has also facilitated our youth mental health first aid that we had for our paraprofessionals. Elise, can you talk a little bit more about the TAM coaching process?
Sure, thank you. Pretty much with TAM, we basically TAM, well, I would say TAM stands for Trauma Attuned Model. And this was designed to recognize and address the underlying source of trauma that many students may be experiencing, and that may in turn lead to challenging externalized behaviors and negative mental health outcomes. As you can see, the TAM coaching process is our domains that we implement, the environment, and what we're looking for definitely is the classroom decor, lighting, temperature, those different things. Part of the domain as well as materials and assignments, trauma-attuned learning materials and assignments that take into account and support students' individual differences, as well as the relationship with the student, with the teacher, nurturing and supportive relationships. These are things that we look into for our TAM training, the coaching process that I would implement with the teachers. De-escalation, if there's a crisis in the classroom, coaching with the teacher if they're experiencing anything from behaviors with the students on how to de-escalate a situation to help the student along that may be experiencing a challenge in their day-to-day living. Okay, you can turn the.
So
Okay.
another endeavor that Elise has been helping us with is virtual drop-ins for our staff members. They are held every Thursday from 9 to 11 for 2 hours. Teachers that are able can drop in virtually. And then as you can see on the slide, the various topics that are discussed. But this is just a way for us to, provide support for our staff during this time as well. Elise, you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, with the virtual drop-ins, it's a wellness for the teachers. Teachers have the opportunity to come on for 15 minutes. I do explain that I am not there to do therapy work. It's more so an outlet for them. We try to touch on basis of renewal for the month of January. It's a new beginning, renewing the different goals that they may have wanted to put in place, and we discuss those things to help implement within their classroom. As well as meta, we try to talk about different ways to unwind and loving themselves and taking care of themselves. March as we keep moving forward. So we're going to more or less get to that end together. And we work with one another. We talk with one another within that 15-minute time frame. And as you can see, April, May, and June are also those months that we implement different healings for the teachers so that they can have a way to continue their teaching and not feel overwhelmed themselves. Okay, pretty much this is what's been in place. As you can see, the full year PD workshop series, at least all staff to build reentry capacity up to 12 hours. These are the things that we have delivered. 3 of 4 professional learning workshops for professional staff have been completed to date. You can look at the different work streams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And on the right-hand side, you will see the deliveries that we have completed thus far. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Elise. Some additional support that we're receiving from Effective School Solutions is a clinician at Elkins Park School. Currently, she is seeing 7 students that are on their Tier 3 for MTSS. We're receiving a lot of great feedback in regards to that support. She may not be able to see a large number of students, but the students that she does see, she's able to make a significant impact where that child's behavior has dramatically changed from the start of the school year when she started to see them. So it's really changing the atmosphere in those particular classrooms as she's working with those students. Another positive aspect of that clinical support is it also doubles as family therapy. So she meets with the students in groups, she meets with the students individually, and then she also has time to meet with their families. So we've received some really great feedback. We've already had 2 students that have been discharged from that program due to progress, and she has 3 more referrals that she's working on now. She has a capacity of about 10 students that she can see. We implemented with our ESSER funds Second Step for our K through 8 counselors, as well as mental health and wellness counselors. We have received some amazing feedback in regards to Second Step. It's evidence-based, it's scope and sequence. The messages, the videos, and the worksheets that they have are modern, and the students are really able to relate. One other great component is that there's a parent component. So if a parent is expressing interest in incorporating some social emotional learning at home with their students, they can implement that in alignment with what the counselor is already putting in place with the students in the groups. With our funds from ESSER, we have increased our support from Aldersgate. We have an additional day with our student assistance program counselor at Cheltenham High School. Right now, she works with our students on Fridays, and we added an additional day on Monday for her to see students. She sees students at Cedarbrook as well, and we added a new staff counselor at Elkins Park to provide support for those students. They focus on drug, alcohol, as well as anxiety. And as we know, anxiety is a major issue with our students right now, and it's good to have that additional support from Aldersgate to be able to see students individually as well as in groups. This past week, we wrapped up a grief group at Glenside through Safe Harbor. They offered that program along with the school counselor. And our mental health and wellness counselor at the high school is also working with Safe Harbor to bring back the grief groups at the high school. So as I touched on before, we are using our ESSER funds to support our endeavors to increase our social emotional learning, whether it was through Second Step or increasing the support that we have through Aldersgate. And we also are funding our partnership with Effective School Solutions through our ESSER funds. So some things that we would like to implement in the coming weeks is virtual family counseling with Aldersgate. I had a conversation with their executive director last week, and this would be something that we can offer to families. As we know, there is a shortage of services out in the community. So we are trying to pull on our existing partnerships to see how we can support our families additionally within our school buildings. We are in the final stages of our partnership with Child and Family Focus. We have been in the final stages of this partnership for quite some time to bring a clinician into our K-4 school buildings. The issue that we're facing now is just with Magellan. Everything on our part is done. Everything with Child and Family Focus is done. They are having some delay in regards to Magellan and getting a promissory note. And one thing that I didn't mention, but we are having a community presentation with Cheltenham Communities That Care on January 26th at 7 p.m. It is virtual. I am happy to sit on the board of that organization, and they are providing a program entitled Navigating the Mental Health System. When we meet together as a board, we talk about what are the needs in our community, and one of the needs that stuck out was the availability of services, and that there are a significant wait list and just not available like we would like for it to be. So we decided to have a panel discussion involving Mobile Crisis, Child and Family Focus, as well as Aldersgate, to talk about the services that they're able to render, what their waiting list might be, and assisting families with navigating the mental health system. So are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Keene, for your presentation. It was very comprehensive. You provided a lot of information to the community that's listening and the board as well. So thank you. I'm going to turn this over to the board for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you on the screen. In no particular order, I'm going to start with Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. Also, I realized my hand icon is like the same color as my wall, so it's very hard to see. Anyway, so I have many questions. I will start with just a couple and then let other board members ask a question, and maybe I can ask more if they weren't asked by others. My first question is related to the masking, and I'll preface all of this first by saying thank you for, I said this at the legislative meeting, but just thank you and everybody in administration who has been working so hard for the past, well, the duration of the entire pandemic in navigating the guidance from health and safety experts, navigating the circumstances in our district, and trying to make the very best possible decisions that keep our students safe while balancing their needs. And I also appreciate that there has been a shift from the guidance of the health and safety experts over the past several months, really saying, look, we need to, a year ago we had XYZ cutoffs for going to virtual. We're in a different place in the pandemic. We need to prioritize being in person because what we have learned is how important that is. But I also recognize, and I'm sure we all do, that doesn't mean COVID itself is safe. It just means that we absolutely need to prioritize having kids learning in person. So to that end, the things we can control, the things that make it safe to be in the building are our district's ability to enforce mitigation tactics. And one of those mitigation tactics is, for instance, having high quality masks. And I was wondering if we can, or if we have explored the idea of providing masks that we have deemed to be the appropriate level of quality, and what we can do to maybe, I've heard, I know it's just rumors, but I've heard lots of anecdotal feedback that not everyone, for instance, at the high school, or not every student is wearing their mask. It's not appropriately fitting, et cetera, et cetera. And these are things we maybe can impact while still having an in-person learning experience. So my question is, can we look at buying masks and providing them to our staff and students? Because we know that cloth masks they don't cut it anymore when compared to, for instance, KN95s and N95s. And it ultimately becomes an equity issue where, not every family necessarily can afford to purchase high quality masks, but we still want their students to be safe, and of course our school community to be safe.
Thank you for your question. At this time, we do have an order currently placed for KN95 masks for children and adults. It wouldn't span for the entire school district, but they would be there as backups, and the backups go pretty quickly. So all of our students would have access to those particular masks once that order is shipped and we receive it.
Thank you. And so I guess maybe this is a question, because I understand it's like, as a co-chair of the finance committee, I understand it becomes down to a sort of balancing resources to, cost and benefit essentially. But given, I haven't done the research, but I know we had a community member reach out and suggest that it might only cost $5 a month to have students have access to high quality masks. And, that's not nothing when you multiply it by 4,000, but when we have ESSER funds, and if that does mean the difference between 10% spread and 5% spread, I wonder if we can or could explore it more serious, not that I don't know how seriously it has been explored. I guess that's the root of my question. What would
So Dan, let me just jump in real quick.
Yeah, thank you.
I do have Mr. Holman looking into ordering additional K95 masks for adults and for students. We will investigate and see the feasibility. I'm not going to commit to that now. We're just doing it to make sure even the reserve mask we have enough. That is not a precedent that we have set as a district. I hear the one voice right now. Maybe the whole board feels that that is something that we should pursue through ESSER funds. Let me run the numbers. Let me look at it. Let me see what that will cost. So I can circle back with an update, but I feel it's necessary for me to voice where we are from that perspective, and not Ms. King.
Thank you. That's greatly appreciated. Also, I will note that it is one voice at this point. So, and that what you just said does reflect administrative effort. So I guess, do other members of the board think that this would be a worthwhile thing to pursue? is something I would throw out to
I'm
learn.
gonna- I'm
I'd
gonna
like
throw
to
it out a
add
little-
just-
I'm gonna throw out a little differently, Mr. Schultz. I'm gonna ask, is there any member of the board who opposes administration looking into the cost of having KN95 masks available for students? I don't hear any voiced opposition, so Dr. Scriven, I think that means it's a go. If you
Okay,
could find out that information. Thank
all right,
you.
will do. Yes, ma'am.
Do it. And I apologize. I wasn't trying to. Thank you for stepping in.
Not a problem. Okay, Mr. Schultz, did you have any other questions?
I will lower my hand and circle back to them if they're not asked by other board members. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And thank you for your questions. Mr. Fishbein?
Unmuting. First, I wanted to check out the dashboard, which I think should inform all of our concerns and our evaluation of the current state of COVID. And the dashboard's information is very encouraging. The incidents were dramatically higher the first week of January and are on a significant downward trend. And that data is important to inform decisions like, should we spend thousands of dollars on masks? And it may be that we don't need to in the very near future because this wave may be, and I'm not a doctor, and again, CHOP guidance will govern this, but it's just, things may be going in the right direction. And the other thing is, whatever the cost may be, we need to also consider how much in ESSER funding we have left as part of that calculus. All that's just by way of commentary. That wasn't a question. The question that I have is, I'm thrilled to see all of the clinical work being done by Effective School Solutions and Aldersgate in the schools. I'm thrilled to see all of the professional development and parent training. All of that is just phenomenal. Our students in the buildings still, anecdotally, it seems, need the availability of one-on-one counseling perhaps more than those private contractors are able to give us, given the time limitations they have. Two questions after that premise. One is there funding to bring more clinicians into the building, either as private contractors or hiring more clinicians to be school employees? That's really my question. I don't know whether our school counselors who we already employ are also doing one-on-one work with students. So that was a lot, but could you respond, Ms. Keene, to all of that? Thanks.
Yes. So I will say that utilizing some of the ESSER funds, we are looking into increased clinical support at our high school. Much like the nursing shortage, there's a shortage of subcontractors for clinical and counseling support. But that inquiry has been out there for a few weeks as well, trying to get that additional support at the high school. In regards to whether or not our school counselors are providing that service, they absolutely are. They're seeing students one-on-one, providing them with support if the student has an IEP. They're providing some support in regards to the IEPs, making sure that the goals are being met as long as it's appropriate for them to render that service. And we also have our mental health and wellness counselor at the high school who's doing more therapeutic long-term work. And we have our mental health and wellness counselor at Cedar Brook Middle School who is doing the same. But yes, our counselors are definitely providing that additional emotional support for our students.
And just one quick follow-up. Is the supply adequate for the demand, or are there students whose needs are that you're aware of who want that service but aren't able to access it because of a limited supply of that service?
I would say no. They always have access to the school counselor, so they're able to get that support. Where I would say things are limited is when we need to refer them out for outside counseling or outside support. That's where sometimes we find our limits.
Thank you very much. That's all I had. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
presentation and all the phenomenal work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. And I see Ms. Lohman's hand is raised. So Ms. Lohman?
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Thank you, Ms. Keene and Ms. Bronson, for the presentation tonight. It was really interesting and informative, and I appreciate hearing about what is happening, especially with the supports that you're providing, Ms. Bronson, at EP. It sounds like a very interesting program, so thank you for that information. I had one question that was actually related to that Mr. Fishbein asked, so I think I'm going to hold that one in abeyance. I did have, I'm going to sort of go back to a masking question. It does seem, I don't know if this is a correct assessment or not, but that's sort of sometimes the weakest link, if you will, in terms of sort of ensuring kids aren't, unduly sort of exposed to potential COVID, to COVID is in the lunchroom, right, where they have their masks off. They may or may not be appropriately socially distancing, and they may be in there for longer than 15 minutes, and so I'm just wondering kind of what the efforts, the mitigation efforts are, at each building to really try to make sure that the lunchroom situation is taken into account. And I bring that up mostly because I think at CHS right before the holidays, that I think the lunchroom situation is really what caused the school to be closed for the last 2 days before the holiday break, because a bunch of kids tested positive, but before they knew that, I guess they went and ate lunch and exposed, several hundred kids. So I'm sort of curious to see if anything's changed as a result of that experience.
So not only as a result of that, but with the new guidance, with the shortening of the quarantine period, all of our principals were made aware last week that we do have to be a little bit more diligent in our cafeteria in regards to masking. We know how challenging that will be for our students while they're eating, but the directive is they keep their mask on while they're eating, remove it to put the food in their mouth and put it back on. Because if we have students that are coming off of their quarantine from day 6 to 10, they are required to wear the mask that is well fitted. And also to participate in Mask to Stay, the masks need to be worn and well fitted. So the directive in general has changed in regards to what we are implementing in the cafeteria. So the administrators that are in the cafeteria will be looking and enforcing it a little bit differently as we go forward.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, because I've been just wondering about that, and also right now it's cold, but as the weather gets warmer again, opportunities certainly for the older kids to perhaps go outside also, to eat lunch. I think that was happening at CHS, when the weather was okay, and just hoping that will happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Did you have any other questions? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just looking back at my email to see what I had posed in that question. I think that one of our attendees is probably going to ask this question, so I don't mean to preempt her, but the question about the issue of sort of using ESSER funds, or thinking about at least dedicating some funding to some social work services at either more globally within the district or at particular buildings. I was just wondering where that stands in terms of consideration.
We haven't had any specific conversations in increasing our social work services. Our focus is really the clinical within the buildings that can provide the one-on-one support for students. We currently do have 2 social workers, 1 elementary and 1 secondary, and they are able to provide that outside support for students that are in need of it. But we would like to provide as much as we can in-house for our students. So we're looking for more of the clinical support at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And my final kind of question, and you sort of touched on this a little bit about also with the changes to some of the rules, is where sort of things stand with the sports teams in terms of sort of masking during practice, sort of masking, do they have to, are they required to wear masks while they're practicing or during games? I mean, I'm just, and are the athletic teams still being tested on a weekly basis, or is that also testing that's no longer happening?
So in regards to masking, they are required to wear their mask when they are not actively participating in the competition. So yes, they will be wearing them during practice. But when they're actively participating, they will not be wearing the masks. And in regards to testing, the testing of the athletes did not start this school year as a result of staffing issues. They would require a good amount of staff in order to successfully test all of our athletes. We are in the process now of trying to secure that staff and figuring out a good game plan in order to implement this going forward. But as of now, the athletes are not being tested weekly.
Okay, thank you. That also answers a question because that whole thing with the high school and the basketball team and 5 basketball team members testing positive and all of that. I was wondering sort of where that stood. So thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sloman. Ms. Keene and Ms. Bronson, I wanted to thank you again. I do have a couple of questions. Ms. Keene, you really covered a lot of ground, a lot of information, particularly as we were talking about changes to the health and safety plan. It may be helpful, and I'm not sure whether we were thinking about doing this, but this is just, again, one board member. Given these updates and variations from what we currently have in our health and safety plan, it may be worthwhile to have Q&As related to the topical areas that you discussed this evening, because those were real modifications from what we currently were, used to. And so it may be helpful for families and students alike to have that in a Q&A format. So I just offer that as a suggestion, as a way
We
to
actually have a draft of a fact sheet that we're going to be providing to families. We are working on that currently, so thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And then I don't know, this is also an idea because I think we have gotten, as a board, various information about how our ESSER funds are being utilized. And for ESSER 2, I know that we are definitely utilizing those funds for both health and safety and welfare purposes. And it may be helpful to see kind of what our full amount of ESSER funds were and what we've utilized those for, and then how much we have left. I know that we have ESSER 3 funds as well that we're exploring now with the community in terms of how to use those funds. So is that something that could be readily put together and made available to the board?
May I jump in?
Go ahead, Doug.
I was going to say, I would defer to our business office on that front because that is primarily a business office function. The Office of Education, we're responsible for a portion of the ESSER funds, but the business office has the full picture. And I apologize, Dr. Scriven, you want to jump in?
No, that's okay. And that's what I was going to say. Since I oversee it all, and I know this is from one side of the shop, I'll make sure that I get with the business office to start to give an overview of where we currently stand. It will not be a comprehensive because some fundings have not even been allocated yet, but I can give you a current snapshot definitely of where we are as it relates to our ESSER allocation and spending. So we'll get that.
That's great, thank you. And my last question is around the TAM, the trauma attuned model. And I guess maybe this is for Ms. Bronson. With that model, is that professional development that all teachers undergo, or is that focused or targeted to certain schools?
I
It
can
is-
answer that,
I'm
and then
sorry.
Ms. Bronson can jump in. So there's a representative from all of our school buildings that are participating in the training. So the principals identified the teachers or the staff that they wanted to participate, and then they undergo the professional development as well as the observation, with the goal in mind that they become the coaches for the staff in their particular buildings. And Ms. Bronson, you can add.
Absolutely. Pretty much we have identified at each school a teacher that would be that, which we call the Champions Committee. And this is where it begins with them. And then they're able to translate this training on with their cohorts at a later date.
Great. Thank you. That was my last question. And I see Ms. Mulhern's hand is raised. Ms. Mulhern?
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Again, thank you to Ms. Keen and everyone for all of the work for this presentation. I appreciate it. I'm happy to hear that an FAQ or some information is being developed for parents. One of my questions has to do with the exclusion chart, and having just read this chart on a daily basis the last week for my own children, I feel like I'm fairly intimate with it. And I still was kind of confused after I heard some of your clarifications in the presentation. So I think that possibly this FAQ or this document will hopefully answer some of that to give parents some extra guidance. When you have multiple kids in multiple schools and you're kind of making heads and tails of everything. So more information for parents on that in clear language, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, I think is where some of my confusion came from tonight. I don't think we need to get into that tonight because it sounds like that's being addressed. So thank you for that. I'm super excited about the vaccine clinic tomorrow. I hope there was a good response. I was mostly excited because it's during school for our Cedar Brook students and our high school students. I think that's awesome. A great way to get to them and make it easy for families to negotiate that. So thank you. I agree that the more that we can encourage vaccination, the better it is for all of us. I think those are regarding masking and athletes, this kind of goes along with Jenny's question, but an extension. Are the rules for our athletes or any other group that may be traveling the same, whether they are at a home event or at an away event?
Yes, so they are still required to wear their mask when they're on the sidelines and not actively participating.
Even if the school they're visiting does not have such a rule, our teams are supposed to
Our
be
rule
so
stays the
involved.
same.
Coaches,
Yes.
staff, all of that. Okay, wonderful.
Mhm.
And I guess I would just reiterate just kind of, and I think a number of board members have talked about this, and this is not the first time that it's been discussed, but this idea of, just getting as much, whether it's a social worker or other clinical support, as much as possible to our students. I know, Ms. Keen, it sounded like you said you think that based on what you're hearing and seeing that besides you're getting a good response to the supports that we have offered, we're feeling like that students, especially at the high school, were getting the support that they needed, and that there wasn't a line of students waiting for a support that was not there for them. I hope that is the case, and I would hope that we are communicating, as I'm sure you are, with the counselors that are there, the mental health and wellness counselors, with the principals and staff, to know, when I hear about EP, I'm so glad that program is going well. However, you said at maximum 10 students, there's 7 that are currently being served. I think you said 7 or 8. And, that's a school that has 750 some odd children. So that's wonderful for those, 7 to 10 kids. But I hope that, I would not be surprised if there was a longer list of children, who could benefit from such support. So I hope that we continue to work on this and to improve things there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulhern. I just wanted to point out in the chat, Mr. Cohen has put in the Cheltenham Communities That Care event, the Navigating the Mental Health System, on January 26th. He has a link there for registering for that event. And then, Ms. Lohman, did you want to ask the question that you have in the chat?
Okay, thanks, Ms. Haywood. I didn't want to monopolize, that's why I put it in the chat. But this came up in a different meeting, and I just want to reiterate it here since we're talking about the health and safety plan. Our solicitor has confirmed that we can voluntarily ask families to disclose the vaccination status of their children, and that neighboring school districts, some of whom he represents, have done this. Is this something we would consider doing so that we at least have some sense of the vaccination rates of our students? So
I
that
think
we,
that is definitely something that we can consider doing as we progress this school year, voluntarily asking parents to disclose that information.
okay, thank you. I would appreciate that because I think it gives us a better handle on sort of, how many additional vaccination clinics, for example, we might want to host and all, and, in terms of the chart, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, like, those kinds of things. So I think it might just be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other board questions? I see Mr. Schultz's hand is up. Mr. Schultz?
My hidden hand. I will fix that. Thank you. And I'm glad I waited because many of the questions were indeed asked. I have a sort of short-term process point, which is Ms. Davidson mentioned in a Q&A that the public cannot see the chat, and we may want to be careful to not use the chat because of that fact. I think it would violate sunshine, actually, in the same way emails would. The question I have a process question around the updated health and safety plan. Given that the board has voted on the current health and safety plan and had voted on the previous health and safety plan, will the board be asked to vote on this updated health and safety plan? And I ask partially, at least in my memory, believing that we are supposed to. But if that is corrected or if that's not true, totally fine. But I wanted to raise that question.
I think that might be Dr. Scriven. Could you respond to that question?
Yes, ma'am. So I know that you guys had voted on this health and safety plan earlier, and that during that session that it was shared that this would be a fluid document that will be updated as needed as we move throughout the year, as different guidance is provided, as adjustments would need to be made. I do not feel that it's a document that needs to be voted on every time updates are made based on the fact that that understanding was put out back when Dr. Hacker was in the interim position. So I did my due diligence before this meeting just to research that. So I do not feel that it's necessary, but I would, this may be a Ed DiSaggio question that we could table and pose, but that's the current position or my current understanding. And thank you for that acknowledgement, Mrs. Hagan.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dr. Scriven. And Mr. Schultz, I think that was our understanding the very first time that we approved the health and safety plan. And there was language in that, at least I think on the first page of that plan, that it was subject for revision and updates based on obviously emerging and changing information that we received.
Thank you. And I wasn't necessarily lobbying for one or the other. I just wanted to understand what the process would be. So thank you.
Yep.
I had a question related to this is actually a question related to the MOU and vaccination status, and I will actually not ask it because it's related to the MOU, but I just wanted to use those words to just say that we have an MOU with CEA regarding basically a vaccine or test. I would maybe benefit from a one-on-one or maybe an executive session, since it may be related to negotiations, understanding what that means now under this new plan. And then my last question is just, will we have an opportunity to learn more about the VLN program, especially as I think that it's going to be more relevant, increasingly relevant over the next several years? I know I'm not asking for more detail in this presentation, but rather, will we have an opportunity to learn more about its history and plans around it at some point in the next several months?
Absolutely. And that information is ready to be disseminated. We have the history and we also have our plans for it moving forward. So whenever the time allows, we can definitely give you more information regarding it.
I guess I defer to Ms. Haywood if I should just, if it's available, if I should ask it now, or if you would rather, if the Ed Affairs Committee, would that be a potential topic for a future Ed Affairs meeting?
I think,
it's. I'm sorry.
go ahead, Dr. Smith.
I was going to say, I think it's appropriate for us to touch upon it tonight, as VLN is not a new program that we use in Cheltenham. I think the difference is how we are assigning the program to different students. That's the only difference, but we've had VLN for quite some time. It does allow students to participate in asynchronous and synchronous instruction. The teachers are not our teachers. It was presented to our acting superintendent to use VLN as a cyber academy model for the school district. One of the things I want to point out is VLN is not a temporary resource. It is students signing up for a course. There is a commitment to the course. So it's not something you can take for 2 weeks. It's not something we would assign to students as they're quarantining. It is equivalent to taking an online course. So if families want VLN for their children, it is a semester-long commitment. And the student will receive credit after they finish VLN. We have dedicated some ESSER funds so that students along the lines of learning loss can use VLN as a means to be a part of the school community and still have a cyber experience. So you can still be a part of Cheltenham School Districts, still be registered on our rolls, still be considered in district, and yet not have to come into the buildings for whatever reasons, whether you're not comfortable quite yet with the pandemic parameters that we have in place. But I think the one thing I definitely want to highlight is this is not a temporary commitment. It is a full semester commitment that families and students engage in. And this is not new to Cheltenham. We have had VLN for quite some time. We've used it for students for a myriad of reasons as to why they could not come back into the building. And the good thing about VLN also is while it is a semester commitment, it is not a forever commitment. So you can, do VLN for the spring semester, for example, at the high school and return to the buildings in the fall. And VLN offers a host of courses and a host of classes. So they can accommodate the classes and the courses that our children need to graduate.
Great, thank you very much. And I guess the long-term questions around where it's going, where we want it to go, I appreciate that we don't necessarily know the full extent of the answer to that, in that we're going to be looking at what virtual learning should look like in this district, and that's a potential strategic plan level discussion, less so than a month-to-month kind of conversation. So thank you very much for the information and the reminder of the.
Right, and may I also add that in the past, we've had limited VLN licenses because it is an expensive endeavor. However, with the ESSER funding, we have dedicated ESSER funds to have VLN as a part of our options for the next 2 years. And we did that presentation before on the fact that you can contract for ESSER funds up to 3 years. So we will be exercising that with VLN because, again, we do not want to engage long-term in something that we cannot sustain with our typical school district funds.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, any other board members' hands raised. So I'm going to go out to the public. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We can unmute you, and then you can state your name and where in the district you live and pose your question. I see Allie Wilson. If we can unmute Ms. Wilson. I'm not sure if Ms. Wilson's unmuted. Ms. Wilson, can you try to speak? We'll see if you're unmuted. No, not yet. Okay. Mr. Kaufman, if you're on the line, could you unmute Ms. Wilson so she can speak? Sorry about that, Ms. Wilson. We're going to try to get you unmuted. Mr. Kaufman, if you're on the line, if you could unmute Ms. Wilson, please.
I'm checking now, Ms. Haywood. I'm not sure if he is on the line or not.
Okay.
Let me see if I can try to get some other technical support.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your patience while we try to unmute you.
Ms. Haywood, in case you're not seeing your screen, Mr. Burdell Williams has a raised hand.
Yes, I saw his hand. I just saw his hand. I'll come back to you, Mr. Burdell Williams, while we try to unmute Ms. Wilson, if you don't mind.
Actually, this is in regards to Ms. Wilson. I know that right now in the moment, we may be, searching for the technical support, but I just wanted to make a recommendation that we could potentially use the CSD board meeting comments email address to hear her, comment just in the moment if we are unable to use the unmute function in order to avoid delay in order to address any questions or concerns.
Thank you for that recommendation, Mr. Burdell Williams. In fact, actually, we can faster just use the Q&A function. Ms. Wilson, you just kind of put a thank you in the Q&A. So if you want to put your question in the Q&A box, we can ask that live for you.
Even better.
Thank you.
I'll probably have to make it a panelist. This is Haywood. Mr. Barone is on here trying to address it. She may have an older Zoom model. We're trying to work through it.
Okay, in the meantime, Ms. Wilson, though, while we're working through the technical difficulties.
We just made her a panelist, Ms. Haywood, so she should be able to jump on as a panelist right now.
Can you hear me now?
We can, and we can see you as well. Great.
Hello, board. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight and ask my question. And also thanks for your patience. I think that was probably the most patient I've seen people on Zoom for maybe the last 2.5 years. So my deepest appreciation and my deepest appreciation for all that you've done. Ms. Keene, your plan on socio-emotional health for students, just recognizing that we have to support the whole student, not only now, but always, is just so important. And I just really appreciate that up front. Mostly, I just want to echo Mr. Schultz's thoughts on masking as an act of equity. I have 3 kids, 2 in the system, who go to Myers. We love it there. They're kindergartners, one of whom does have an underlying condition, reactive airway disorder. And I've also been working in the field of special education for about 15 years now. I work with schools across the country. And one of the things I have noticed is that there are a lot of students left behind and, are facing a lot of this learning loss. Not because parents don't want them to be in school, but because this is scary for a lot of parents. And so when we talk about masking, and when I hear things like, this might be going the other direction, let's not worry about masks as much, that gives me a little pause. I think that's also speculation. And I know that Fauci most recently made an announcement that this might not be over yet. Things might be coming. And so I'd love to just kind of continue to elevate that voice of masking as an act of equity. As someone who gets to work remotely right now, I can choose to keep my kids at home when they're high risk. I did the last 2 weeks. I also can choose to buy them KN95s. I do that, but a lot of parents don't have that decision. And so being able to provide these KN95s for kids, these KF94s, I do know that ESSER funding is not unlimited, but I have done the research and I will reshare it in email with the board. I'm speaking on behalf of 3 different families tonight, but just to give you the basic numbers, it can be as little as 60 cents a mask for a KN vetted 95 Powacom mask, and those can last up to 40 hours. So we're talking 1 mask per kid per week at a cost of about $3 a month. So I just wanted to elevate that voice and remember that like this is an active equity, so all of our kids can be where they belong in school, and think about how this really is something, an active social justice, an active equity, not only for our kids who can afford it or our parents who can afford it, but for all. So thank you again for all you're doing. Thank you for keeping our kids the most safe. We love Cheltenham so much, and I appreciate the patience and the time to express my concerns.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Really appreciate your comments. Any other comments from the public? I see Ms. Davidson. Okay, we're going to try to unmute you as well so you can speak. Dr. Scriven, I don't know whether we need to also make Ms. Davidson a panelist.
I gave her audio permissions.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you. Ms. Davidson, I believe you can speak now.
Hi, everyone. Okay, thank you. A lot of you. This was a great presentation. Thanks. I know a lot of it already from Ms. Keene and Dr. Scriven. Thanks for all your hard work. I just want to continue to advocate for an in-school building social worker. Our guidance counselors are great. And yes, there is a lot of overlap between a guidance counselor and a social worker, but they are drawn to handle the academic success of kids as well. And a social worker can have the ability to work with families in their homes, at least reach out to them, communicate that way, community ties more, and they do indeed do clinical support. They can do long-term mental health therapy when needed. A guidance counselor is going to be more short-term. And again, our guidance team, I'm sure, is pushed to their limits because of learning loss. So they have, everyone just has extra things to do. So yeah, I'm great. I'm so glad to hear how well things are going with Aldersgate. I met that EP social worker and she is great and seems like she could handle a lot more than 10, but I realize that's her agency that she's working for. So again, if you look up lots of schools all around this country, they're spending their ESSER's money on social workers because they want to make up for the learning loss and they want to make sure kids are okay. And it's been nothing but stress. So I think Cheltenham would benefit in the same way. I wish there'd be a social worker in every school. I think that would help with the changes to MOU and the discipline policy. Instead of calling a disciplinarian for help, call the social worker for help. And let's meet this kid and make some restorative practice changes, right? They're in our policy. Who's gonna make it happen in the schools? I think a really good social worker can do that. I would think a really good team of social workers would be a great resource for all staff. Anyways, I guess that's not a question, just my statement. But anyways, just like Ms. Wilson, I love Cheltenham and thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. I'm going to look to see if there are any other questions from attendees. I don't see any. I'm going to go back to the board. Any additional questions from the board? I don't see any right now.
Oh, actually.
Okay, Ms. Lohman.
Sorry, I just following up on Ms. Davidson's comments. I'm just kind of curious because she keeps posing this question. I guess what is kind of the response to her question? from administration? Is it the focus is just what Ms. Keene said, is that we're focusing more on in-building supports, and that the district's feeling is that social workers provide more outside support? I'm just curious. I just don't know.
I just want to clarify one point. So in the school setting, a school social worker and a clinician are two different things, and they serve in two different capacities. So a school social worker is definitely a bridge to school and home as far as referring to outside services. They're handling truancy, they're handling homelessness. And so that's why I said clinician. So I think me and Ms. Davidson are saying the same thing as what we're trying to provide, just using the titles differently. In the clinical realm, the person would be called a social worker. In a school setting, a social worker means something a little different. So we are focusing more on the clinical side, which can do all the things that Ms. Davidson is mentioning.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Does that answer your question? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I guess so. I still admit to being confused, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay.
Well, maybe to clarify, Ms. Keene, could you clarify for the board how many clinicians / social workers and how many actual social workers we have? I think I heard you say we have 2 social workers, one at the elementary level and one at the upper school level. And I just wasn't clear on the number of clinicians we have.
Okay, so that is correct. We have the 2 social workers that are split between elementary and secondary. Then we have 1 clinician at the high school, our mental health and wellness counselor, along with our SAP counselor, who is also a clinician. And then at Cedarbrook, we have the mental health and wellness counselor, who's a clinician. And then we have our Lakeside counselors as well. There is a Lakeside counselor at the high school, and there's a Lakeside counselor at Cedarbrook, and then a Lakeside counselor split between all of our elementary buildings. EP has the clinician support from Effective School Solutions, as well as a SAP counselor who's also a clinician. Our K-4 buildings, the effort was to bring in child and family focus and have a clinician in all of their buildings once a week, and we are in the final stages of that.
That's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board questions or comments? I don't see any. Thank you again, Ms. Keene and Ms. Bronson, for your presentation tonight. Really appreciate it. It's really great to see the additional mental health and social support we're providing to our students during, a very difficult time. I mean, you feel like we're always transitioning, and they're always transitioning. So thank you for really evaluating what's needed. With that, if there are no other questions, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Fishbein, do I have a second? I know that won't be Mr. Schultz, but.
Second, Ms. Lohman.
Second, Ms. Lohman. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Ms. Keene, thank you so much, man. Great job. Thank you,
Thank
board.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you
Good
again.
night,
all.
Night.
Good night.
Night all. Be safe.
Night, everyone.
Good night.